My name's Stacy Seabrook, and I approve Eric Jose on Making a Murderer to be able to use my songs on his channel. Thank you. Let me tell you about a story. Now we men are talk bound about that law enforcement, a right bunch of clowns, how they wear their badge like a plastic crown, how they're sticking to a story of which they are now bound. It's a rabbit hole they don't want you to go down, but over in Wisconsin, they're doubling down.
Hello everybody, this is Eric Jose on Making a Murderer on YouTube. I cover the Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey cases, but also as time passes I've been covering other cases such as the Staircase or OJ and many wrongful convictions of youth. I go over the documents, the photos, the videos, anything case related, so stay tuned because I have many more videos just like the one you're about to see. Alright, how you doing there today folks? Sunday edition. Got on the football jersey for you guys. I know, I'm a Buccaneers fan. Sorry about that, folks, for those of you who don't like the Buccaneers. But anyway, it's Mike Allstott, by the way. I used, back when I used to really follow, the Buccaneers and stuff back in the around the turn of, about 2000s. Warren Sapp, Mike Allstott, Derek Brooks, all that. Back when they were playing incredible defense. I mean, just, so. So anyways, I have the Mike Allstott jersey, of course. I just loved the way that guy used to run the football. It was amazing. Shoulders parallel to the line of scrimmage and just knocking dudes over like bowling pins, man. I just loved it, the way he would run the football. And he would usually wear defenses down, and then he'd end up busting off a big one in the third quarter, taking it for a touchdown. It was just awesome, the way he would run the ball. He would just wear a defense down. And it was just awesome. So anyways, that's enough about that. So that's why I'm wearing football jersey today on Sunday for the football fans out there who are all watching football. So anyways, today what we're going to be talking about, of course, is going to be Karl Reich. He is the DNA expert who was examining the hood latch, swab, the hood latch swab, and the key. So obviously, things to remember. Obviously, you know that we're also evaluating the motions by Zellner leading, we've already covered the motion for post-conviction testing, which talked about wanting to test, a lot of things on the RAV, more than just the hood latch itself, but they actually want the RAV itself so that they can test hood prop. Inside in the cab, the hood release inside the cab they want to test. The battery cables. Any the hood where he would lift it to lift the hood up. Any surface that supposedly Stephen would have had to touch to open this RAV4 up, they want to test. They want to find out because if he's leaving, as you're going to find out in this here affidavit from Karl Reich, if he's leaving nearly 2 full nanograms on the hood latch, then he's going to be leaving comparable amounts on these other things. And the fact that we don't have swabs of those things is kind of strange. Why is it only the hood latch itself? I mean, first thing he would have touched to get the hood open would have been the interior hood latch, the one inside the cab. So if he left 2 nanograms on the latch, he should have left, or nearly 2 nanograms, he should have left 2 nanograms or maybe more on the interior one when he pulled that to release the hood, so that he could even get at the hood latch. He would have had to touch that first, right? Logically, that's the way that works, right? So these are all the interesting things. So you're going to see what he points out here, like I said. And they do their own hood latch opening experiments, and they try to recreate getting 1.9 nanograms. They try to recreate that and see if they can get anything close to that. And what they end up finding out is that only 4 out of 15 openings gave a registerable amount of DNA. And of those 4, they were all under 1/10 of an anagram. 1/10 of an anagram. That's minute in the extreme. So that's what this basically centers around. It also talks about how the DNA on the key is suspect. The fact that there's none of the victim's DNA on this key that she would supposedly have been using every day to drive her car. Yet there's kind of an abundance of Stephen Avery's DNA on it, which suggests that something's a little bit off there. So anyways, and you saw that in the motion we were covering yesterday, in the motion for scientific testing, where she's asking about wanting to be able to question Sherry Culhane more on this of what she was talking about in her court testimony about this masking that supposedly could have happened with the key that would have masked Teresa's DNA completely and only left Stephen's DNA. So she mentioned that in the motion for post-conviction scientific testing. So I thought that was interesting. Kind of goes along with this one as well. So we're going to go ahead and get into it, and we'll come on back one more time before the end. Today we're going to be talking about the DNA on the hood latch and the DNA on the Toyota RAV4 key. We're going to be hearing from Dr. Karl Reich. We're going to see his credentials here in a second. But he's going to go into explaining why he believes that the evidence, the whatever they collected off of the hood latch is suspect and warrants further investigation. And also why the DNA that was found on the RAV4 key is suspect and warrants further investigation. So we're going to be going into that. I just like making these videos because then it gives people a chance who maybe aren't as willing to spend, 10, 15 minutes to read one of these documents, who can more easily watch a video and get the gist of it. So that's, I'm just basically trying to make all this information more available to everybody who might not otherwise have found the documents. At least they can see something of what's going on and what Zellner is saying in her filing. So that's my main focus, my main goal here, folks. So here we go. We'll move right into it. Why should we listen to Mr. Karl Reich, PhD? Why should we listen to him? What's so special about him? Well, here we go. Let's see his credentials. I, Dr. Karl Reich, under oath and under penalty of perjury, state that I am a DNA analyst and professional molecular biologist. I have a doctorate in molecular biology and am a chief scientific officer of Independent Forensics of Illinois. Independent Forensics Laboratory adheres to the FBI's quality assurance standards for molecular biology, human genetics, and forensic DNA testing laboratories. Independent Forensics is accredited by ANSI, ASQ, National Accreditation Board, the American Association of Blood Banks, the New York State Department of Health for genetic identity and forensic DNA testing. Independent Forensics is the only such laboratory in Illinois. Okay, so there's Dr. Reich's qualifications. Now, we're going to move into where he talks about the fact that they tested the swab that they were sent for item for basically it was the swab of the hood latch, what was left of it, and they tested it and they determined that it basically was not saliva, blood, semen, or urine. It was none of those four bodily fluids. Okay, they were able to ascertain that. So that means most likely it would have had to be skin cells of some sort. Okay, skin cells would have been collected from anywhere on the skin, really, but to get large amounts, you have to swab your inside of your cheek or perhaps a groin area, because you generally kind of have the general warmth of the area tends to create a little bit of moisture that makes it a little bit easier for some epithelial cells to get caught up on the swab. So that's a couple ways where you would create an abundance of DNA on a swab. So anyways, what they're going to get into here is that none of those bodily fluids were found, and that they did some further testing to kind of see how much was it possible to deposit on a hood latch, and the results are interesting. It is well documented that DNA was isolated from the listed item, and this DNA generated a DNA profile of the defendant. The process of obtaining a DNA profile from a biological sample includes an obligatory step to estimate the amount of recovered DNA. This step is called DNA quantification. The current method of DNA quantification uses a technique, quantitative PCR, or qPCR, a variant of the polymerase chain reaction. The documentation from the Wisconsin Department of Justice State Crime Laboratory, Madison, reveals that 1.9 nanograms of human DNA was recovered from the listed sample. At trial, it was claimed that the defendant's DNA on the listed item of evidence was deposited from sweaty fingers. This is, of course, pure speculation, as there is no forensic test for the presence of sweat. Nonetheless, the DNA that generated the profile came from somewhere. In an attempt to replicate the findings reported by the Wisconsin Department of Justice State Crime Laboratory, Madison, our laboratory performed a series of experiments on a vehicle identical to that impounded by law enforcement in this case. Volunteers were enlisted to open the car hood of this surrogate vehicle using the engine compartment hood latch, the latch that was then swabbed, and a quantity of DNA recovered estimated by qPCR, the current method used by the Wisconsin State Forensic DNA Laboratory, Madison. This experimental test was repeated 15 times. The hood latch was, of course, cleaned after each round and subsequent opening. The results of this test series is instructive. In 11 of the 15 replicates, no detectable DNA was recovered from the hood latch. In other words, the amount of DNA recovered after swabbing the hood latch used to open the vehicle was less than the minimum detection threshold of the qPCR method, less than 0.005 nanograms. In 4 of the replicates, quantifiable DNA was recovered with the following results: a 0.05 nanograms, a 0.09 nanograms. Hey, that one almost got to 0.1, 0.06 nanograms, and 0.07 nanograms, which is important because the crime lab claims they got 1.9 nanograms from it. So, in other words, in almost 3/4 of the hood opening trials, no measurable DNA was left behind by the individual who opened the hood. Put another way, even when DNA was left on the hood latch after opening the hood, the amount of DNA recovered was between 20 and 35 times less than that was recovered from the item identified as M05-2467 #ID, which is the swab of the hood latch. To put it yet another way, the Madison Laboratory recovered from 6 to 7 times more DNA than all of the DNA recovered from all 15 hood openings combined. Given the experimental results and both the fact the body fluid detection data and the DNA recovery data from the hood latch opening trials, the question of what sample M05-2467's #ID really might be becomes a subject for investigation. Okay, this is Dr. Reich summing up what their testing was, basically what it boils down to. For a variety of reasons, the forensic evidence in Wisconsin versus Avery is being seriously scrutinized and re-examined. This includes the forensic DNA analysis conducted by the Wisconsin Department of Justice State Crime Laboratory, Madison. On item M05-2467 #ID, the data obtained from the body fluid identification testing, from DNA quantification, and from DNA profile, and from attempts at replicating the sample in question are contradictory. The data show an unacceptable DNA profile from a sample with no indication of a body fluid, a robust amount of DNA recovered from the sample, and yet attempts to replicate this finding failing repeatedly. These facts prompt a reevaluation of this evidence. So, what Dr. Reich did there was, number one, he pointed out that the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, when they tested the swab of the hood latch, they put it in the solution and did everything, and they got about 1.9 nanograms viable, like DNA material, genetic material. Okay? That's quite a significant amount of DNA. Okay? And that prompted them, because they thought that was a high amount that they got, so they went a little bit further with this, and they went ahead and they got a RAV4 that's pretty much the same as Teresa's, and they had 15 different people come up and open the hood on it, swabbed it after they opened it, swabbed it to collect the sample, cleaned the hood latch again for the next one to come up and open it. Did it 15 times, and 11 out of those 15 times, they didn't even get a registerable. It wasn't even enough DNA left on the hood latch to register in their tests. Okay, so how do we go from a task that 11 out of 15 times doesn't even leave enough DNA to register, and yet somehow when Stephen Avery does it, he leaves 1.9 nanograms on it? Right? Yeah. So you can see why this DNA expert had a problem with it. It seems pretty clear that he was he saw that as a high amount. He was just like, wow, that's a lot of freaking DNA. And he just thought that an experiment was in order. So Dr. Wright continues raising his concerns. The chain of custody and disposition of the 2 groin swabs taken from the defendant during his arrest is neither complete, accurate, or transparent. Such a sample, relabeled as taken from the hood latch of the victim's vehicle, would satisfy all of the observed facts. Lack of body fluid, sufficient amount of DNA for a profile that would link the defendant to the victim without all of the messy and complicated effort of actually depositing DNA on a greasy and grimed engine compartment metal latch. The convenience of this explanation and the fact that it accounts for the physical findings observed from the analysis of item M05-2467 #ID does not prove evidence tampering, but more precisely evidence reassignment. But this hypothesis is a far better fit to the data, experimental trials, and need of the investigation for clear and convincing evidence of a link between the defendant and the victim's vehicle. A swab, truly taken from the engine compartment hood latch, should have been covered in black engine grime and grease, as anyone who has ever had to open a hood of a high-mileage vehicle can attest. The swab batting in question was merely very lightly discolored, another fact that does not fit with the claimed origin of this sample. Analysis of the bedroom slippers as possible source of the DNA on M05-2467 #C, which is the Toyota key. Our lab conducted an experiment to examine whether the bedroom slippers recovered from Mr. Avery's residence could have been the source of his DNA detected on the Toyota ignition key, M05-2467 #C, allegedly recovered from Mr. Avery's bedroom. This hypothesis was tested by creating a pair of worn slippers, sockless 9 hours a day for 5 days, and using this worn item as a source of DNA on an exemplar key, ignition key. The procedure was to prepare the slippers, rub the key, and then measure the DNA that was transferred, again using the qPCR technique. This approach yielded 0.0393 nanograms per microliter, well below the concentration of DNA reported by the Wisconsin Department of Justice State Crime Lab, Madison. For the key they analyzed, M05-2467 #C, at 0.17 nanograms per microliter. That's like almost 6 times more. So that's significant. These data do not support the hypothesis that the DNA identified on the Toyota ignition key came from contact with the slippers photographed in and recovered from Mr. Avery's bedroom. If the Toyota ignition key was indeed enhanced, then it is likely some other personal item of Mr. Avery's was used for this purpose. Some possible examples for that might be a toothbrush or a cigarette butt. Conclusion regarding the chain of custody. In order to account for the physical findings of body fluid identification, actually the lack thereof, because they didn't find any bodily fluids in the sample, of DNA profiling, of attempts at an evidence recreation, and of the physical condition of the item M05-2467 #ID. It is hypothesized that a rubbed groin swab taken from the defendant was relabeled and thus became evidence from a hood latch. This hypothesis has not been proven, but it fully explains all of the known facts regarding this item. Taken into context with the other facts and allegations in the case of Wisconsin versus Avery, this hypothesis deserves careful consideration from the trier of fact. Signed, Karl Reich. Okay, so to sum up with Dr. Reich, what we've got here is the amount of DNA that the crime lab, the Madison crime lab, claimed, that they say was deposited on that hood latch, is so astronomically high compared to what the experiments they ran came back with. Barely registering 0.00 0.009, 0.006, 0.007. Okay? And the Madison Crime Lab has in their lab report that they got 1.9 nanograms. Okay? Not in the point zeros, not in the point anythings. They had at least one full nanogram. 1.9, that's almost 2. Almost 2 nanograms. And yet, when they run their experiments with people opening that hood latch, they were barely able to get only four of the experimental openings actually measured by their equipment. So that's significant. And yet, somehow, when Stephen Avery does it, well, yeah, of course, when Stephen Avery does it, he deposits 2 nanograms. Are you silly? Of course he does. It's Stephen Avery. He's the idiot savant. He's the one that's so idiotic that he leaves his blood all over the inside of the RAV4 and next to the ignition, but yet somehow doesn't leave any of his fingerprints anywhere. Yeah. Idiot savant. Idiot savant. I mean, Zellner had that nailed in her introduction, in this, filing, this, motion for post-conviction relief. So when she was going back and forth between Stephen the idiot and Stephen the savant, that was profoundly to the point. So, and I think that this finding by this DNA expert is equally so. So we have that. Then we also have the fact that they don't like the fact that they tried to recreate the situation with the key of how the prosecution is saying that Stephen left his DNA on that key. Okay, without any of Teresa's being left on it. So for some reason, Stephen completely washes that key so that no DNA is on it, not his, not Teresa's, or whatever, and then walks around with it for 15 minutes or so in his hand and deposits 0.17 nanograms of his DNA on it. And when Dr. Reich and his staff tried to recreate that, they come up with a 0.03 nanograms to get left on that key, not 0.17 as the Wisconsin State Crime Lab apparently found on the key. So they're finding these discrepancies, and then they're pointing out the fact that the chain of command on those groin swabs was incomplete, inaccurate, and not transparent. And so all of these things together, combined with their experiments and the results of their experiments, and the problem in the chain of custody, all these things culminate to create this huge suspicion around the hood latch evidence, and whether or not it can be taken seriously, because they are basically coming right out and saying it, that they believe that somebody may have switched a label so that a groin swab it was basically supposed to be for comparison DNA or whatever, correct? Okay. But somebody switches the tags on it, and suddenly it goes from being a comparison swab or whatever to becoming the hood latch swab. And that's what they're basically saying happened here. And the reasoning is completely sound. They've done the work on it. They've done the experiments. Their reasoning is completely sound. They're not saying that we have proof that this happened, but this is the one explanation that would explain why all these things, why all of the results came out the way they did. This would be the one explanation that pretty much would explain why those results are the way they are. So that's about it, folks. I love it. Zellner really, really went out and got some really good experts, and these guys are sharp. They are on top of it, and I'm liking it. Looks good for Stephen and Brendan. Despite what you hear all the guilters and everybody out there saying on Twitter and stuff like that, I think they're overstating it. I don't know how they could think that this is so easy to ignore. And the way that the test results came out way too high, much higher amounts of DNA than they should have had. Just all of it together all adds up to something's a little bit off here, fellas. Okay, so that wraps up the affidavit from Karl Reich. He's, you guys saw him obviously covered in MAM2. He was, that stuff that he's talking about was covered there. I just think it's interesting to have a look at these affidavits and the actual, literature that goes along with this stuff. That's what the courts look at. So I think that's kind of part of why I do this. But for those that want greater awareness, I also link the document, the full document down below. You can go check out if you want. So, interesting things here. Minimum threshold of the DNA test for the hood latch when they were testing the 15 people that were opening the hood latch, basically, or the 15 different openings of the hood latch, basically. The minimum threshold on that test, just so you understand, four of them actually left a measurable amount, correct? Out of 15. The other 11 left less than left less than 0.005 nanograms. That's basically half of 100th. I mean, it's such a minute amount, and for 11 openings they couldn't even generate that. And of the openings that do produce a measurable amount of DNA, we get 0.04 nanograms, 0.06 nanograms, 0.07 nanograms, and 0.09 nanograms. This is, minute amounts. These are, it's just minute amounts, really minute. And the fact that somehow Stephen leaves nearly 2 full nanograms is more than just a little interesting. And 11 that couldn't even produce half of 100th of a nanogram. When you're getting into the hundredths and everything like that, you're getting you're getting well beyond, you're getting into very minute amounts. Okay, so the fact that 11 openings couldn't even produce that minute amount is interesting. So anyways, that's some of the interesting things here. I just want to point some of them out for you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you found it informative. And I hope it goes along with some of what Travis and I are trying to do here today and in this week leading up to Zellner's filing on December 20th. So to try and get you guys a bit more information, what's gone before, kind of what the process is, how it started type of deal. So hopefully you guys will be able to get a bit more information from all this. So if you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see ya.
Time I think on your hands too long. Closer to 30. If it was up to you're more than 30. How do you think that we're gonna live? We're gonna squeeze your money, you're gonna have to give. When you're all dried up, we're gonna feel better. If the system's at fault, you can always send a letter.